just a few lines today to let you know I am still among the living.
I can't mention anything much of my present spot, as it is forbidden.
I am now located somewhere in North Africa.
Somewhere in France.
Somewhere in India.
Somewhere in the Philippines.
Somewhere in Italy.
Somewhere in Holland.
Somewhere in Australia.
I'm getting around to writing you and thanking you for sending the Grapevine to me. It's really all the people back home that keep us going over here.
I have always thought the employees of the FCA were the finest group of people I have ever known.
World War II was the biggest and bloodiest war in history, fought on virtually every continent in the world, and FCA's men and women were there. The war scattered the close-knit staff of the Farm Credit Administration across the United States and around the globe.
Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan.
The United States entered the war by declaring war on Japan on December 8, 1941, the day after the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. 3 days later, Nazi Germany's Chancellor Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States. From then on, U.S. troops would be spread across both Western Europe and the Pacific. The Allies, England, the Soviet Union, the United States, and China, often called the Forgotten Ally, faced off against the Axis countries, Germany, Italy, and Japan. Soldiers from 30 countries fought in World War II. 50 million or more civilians died. Many millions on top of that were injured, and millions became refugees. Most FCA employees in Washington, D.C. were relocated to Kansas City in 1942 because the government needed FCA's headquarters for what they called more vital purposes. Many people left families behind, knowing only that the war's end, whenever that would be, could bring them together again. In Kansas City, volunteers in the Farm Credit Club decided to start a newsletter to keep people in touch, and they sent it to every employee and every FCA soldier. The bi-weekly Grapevine would be FCA employees' lifelines to one another until the war was over. Despite knowing that it could take months for a letter to reach their families and friends, many soldiers wrote in. From somewhere in Europe, a letter by First Lieutenant E.L. Waterman illustrates the kind of news those back home most needed to hear. I'm okay. It also shows how much the soldiers needed to feel connected to their previous lives.
I'm writing in a tent, a whiskey case for a table, and for a candle, a can of GI shoe waterproofing paste, melted with a piece of string floating in it, for a wick. I'm now serving with a combat engineer battalion. There's nothing to say of myself that would not be a restatement of the circumstances of millions of other Americans. So I'll just say I'm well, cheerful, and looking forward to going home. Please remember me to my friends in Farm Credit, and if possible, through the Grapevine to those in the service.
When the United States entered the war, the Nazis seemed invincible. England was the only country in Western Europe they had not yet conquered. Hitler offered Britain a peace agreement, which they refused. England was alone in the fight in Western Europe. Hitler's goal was to destroy the British Royal Air Force and gain control of the English Channel and Britain. The Germans began by air bombing only military and industrial targets. But when the English didn't give up, Hitler decided to erase English cities from the map and destroy the British people's morale. It was called the Blitz. And when it ended in May 1941, more than 43,000 civilians were dead and 2 million homes damaged or destroyed. But England had stood its ground. The Nazis had failed.
For 4 months after leaving the USA, I never saw a streetlight at night. It does not seem possible that there are children living in England who have not seen a street light or any light at night outside of the homes and yet be 4 years old. One thing that impressed me there was that England comes first before any personal desires. But everyone must have their tea, war or no war. Reminded me a lot of the tea times back at the old FCA when the going used to get so tough that we all had to take a rest.
And it was only natural for FCA soldiers to report on farming.
I've just arrived in these parts, like it very much. Was much impressed with the beauty of the countryside, the farm homes, and the good-looking livestock.
In North Africa, one sees everything from mechanized agriculture to biblical scenes, with camels pulling a crooked stick that's supposed to be a plow. In the British Isles, one sees a lot of beautiful heavy draft horses, usually hitched up singly, and often a two-wheeled cart. The fields are fairly small and are odd shapes, which would make them a nightmare to till with a tractor.
Meanwhile, back in the United States, new soldiers were being trained for combat and behind-the-scenes roles. Unlike men, women were not drafted, but many volunteered. Mary McBride, Mercedes Goodson, and Nell Mellett were at the U.S. Naval School in the Bronx, New York, where women from many branches of the service received training. The competition between the nation's military services was stiff.
The Marines really keep me busy, but I love it. Our classes are interesting: Marine Corps history, map reading, military courtesy, etc. We are constantly told that we are better than the Army, Navy, and Coast Guard. We are Marines.
We drill practically every day, and today the Marines took over. Coming back, we sang the Navy version of the Marine hymn, and with feeling too. It was out there on the Albany with the Asiatic fleet. The Marines were so lazy they could only eat and sleep.
We saw Mercedes tonight. She's been on KP ever since we've been here. She threw a roll on our trays tonight as we passed along the line.
Marine Lieutenant Robert P. Beach was at Quantico, Virginia.
I heard that the Marines handed out pretty rough training, but I didn't fully appreciate the meaning of the word rough. The next 2 weeks are to be corkus. We will make a daylight landing under fire. We have blown up bridges, blown down trees, blown craters in rows, and eliminate barbed wire entanglements with high explosives.
Through letters from FCA troops, it's possible to chart both World War II's progress and its pace. In a letter from Guadalcanal, Marine Corps Private Michael Sofchak reported on what would turn out to be one of the war's most significant engagements, the 6-month battle for the largest of the Solomon Islands. The goal? To stop Japan from expanding its empire from China to Australia.
Plunging into malaria-infested jungles, the Marines steadily, doggedly enlarged their hold on the island.
Like most letters from the GIs, Sofchak's letters were cheerful and good-humored, barely hinting at the horrors of the front.
I'm still a lucky guy and I'm enjoying good health. I sure can thank God a million for my luck, and I have a steel helmet with somewhat of a hole in it to prove my point. It's plenty hot here, and when it rains it pours. We get plenty wet. Jungles, jungles, jungles. That's about all I can say for it. Gee, I miss the gang, and how I hope that real soon I can be back. In a week I'll be having a birthday. I hope I'm around to enjoy it. I say I hope I'm around, because between now and then, things are expected to take place. I've taken several new slants on life. This thing called war does this to a fellow. A few days after my birthday, I was wounded in action. Not seriously, though. I spent approximately 5 weeks recuperating, and now, thanks to God, I'm in tip-top shape again. Lucky Shoke Chef. That's what they call me.
A month later, Lucky Sofchak wrote again, this time sharing more about his injuries. His wounds revealed the brutal nature of the fighting of Guadalcanal.
I guess I've got 9 lives like a cat. Regarding my injuries, well, I was cut up by a bayonet on both hands and left wrist. The wounds have healed perfectly and scars are hardly noticeable.
The Allies won the Battle of Guadalcanal, and the victory turned the tide of the war in the Pacific, giving troops and the folks back home a high morale boost that inspired them to move forward on all fronts. The jungles of New Guinea also needed to be conquered in the push to Japan.
Copies of the April 5th and May 3rd Grapevine arrived yesterday, and my jungle pillbox carried 15 miles through hip-deep mud. My reply of thanks go back on my only sheet of V-mail stationery by Mosquito Carrier. We attached the letter to one of his hind legs, touch a cigarette to his tail, and off he goes to the ocean 20 miles off, where the letters are picked up. Our activity has reached a tempo that we are somewhat proud of, although it's somewhat more than rugged.
Soldiers from FCA were also fighting Germany and Italy in North Africa, where Allies were trying to create a path to Sicily. This reminded Corporal Joe Linden of his early days at FCA.
I enjoyed all the time I spent at the FCA, except perhaps the first week or so when I was a messenger. My feet hurt too much for me to enjoy anything. In that respect, my first few weeks in Africa were a good deal like my first few weeks at the FCA. Boy, did I have blisters.
That May, the Allies took Tunisia, and the war in Africa was over. With North Africa in Allied hands, troops moved up Italy's boot, taking control there, then headed on to Germany.
Our group received a presidential citation yesterday. It seems we've materially aided in giving the Germans a headache, and you may be sure we're not finished yet.
Today, just as in these scenes, the armies of the United Nations have made their first landings on the soil of Western Europe. Another of the great decisive battles of world history has been joined. This is the day for which free people long have waited. This is D-Day.
The Allies spent a year planning the campaign to retake France from Germany. Launched on June 6, 1944, D-Day was the largest seaborne invasion in world history, with 176,000 on the Allied side alone.
I wonder how many FCA boys came into France with me. Tell everybody I am okay. No one stripes, no Purple Hearts, or nothing. I see you had your annual picnic. You ain't got nothing on me. I started my picnic on June 6th and am still on it. We even had fireworks on ours. What did you have on yours? I bet you had more to eat and more time to eat it. It is time for foxy little Smitty to crawl into his foxhole. I hope to be back with the gang soon.
Within months, the Allies had opened a path to Paris, but they paid a high price. 100,000 Allied soldiers died in the battle. Sergeant Eleanor Frederick may have met some of the wounded in England a few months later.
On Christmas Day, some of us WACs went to the hospital to see the boys. Of course, I am still a bit bashful and didn't quite know what I'd say to sick boys that I didn't know, but they did all the talking and seemed to enjoy it. They talked of fighting, home, and just most anything. They begged us to come back because they could talk to us in Army terms and we understood. And of course, they always had that line of, "Good to talk to an American girl because she has a comeback."
Enemy fire keeps us pinned down. We want to pull the beach over our heads like a blanket. We were able to advance from Yellow Beach, but it's slow going.
In the Pacific, the Allies were fighting for the Japanese-occupied island of Iwo Jima.
As we hit Suribachi from the air, supporting ships deliver point-blank fire.
Just a line to let you know I was in the invasion of Iwo Jima. Fortunately, it's over with now, and we came out of it okay, although it was pretty hot for a while. Iwo Jima is just 750 miles from Tokyo and only 610 miles to the closest point of the Japanese mainland. We were on the beach just a few hundred yards from Mount Shirabachi when the Stars and Stripes went up on the highest point. It was a grand sight and brought a cheer from all of us. Keep your fingers crossed. I am. We were sure lucky. Shells were falling all around us while we were there.
Meanwhile, in Europe, the Allies were victorious. May 8, 1945, VE Day, was the end of the war in Europe. Private Smitty described the jubilation.
I was hurt in Germany. V-Day was the day I got out of the hospital, which perhaps proves only that I was gold bricking. Had to change trains in Paris, so the natural thing was to miss my train. Everybody went wild, bands playing, flags waving, lots of parades, mobs of people blowing horns and yelling.
The task of occupying defeated Germany began immediately.
I'm getting rather deep into Germany and seeing many very interesting, if not always pleasant things. So many of the cities of Germany we have passed through are completely destroyed and almost deserted. Some of them in that category still have empty shells of buildings standing, but some appear to be nothing but one pile of rubble with a road shuffled through the middle. One can't help thinking, however, of the many cities in other countries almost, if not quite as badly destroyed.
Still, the war with Japan lingered on. An ally since 1941, China had made little progress against Japan. In 1943, the United States began training Chinese troops.
The Chinese ground forces, now revitalized and American trained, seem much improved over the battered and outmatched force which was driven back into China earlier in the war. Our ally has a very dogged personality, and you seldom see even the most unfortunate disgusted to the point of quitting.
On August 6th, the United States dropped an atomic bomb on the Japanese city of Hiroshima and another over Nagasaki 3 days later. The Japanese surrendered on August 15th, VJ Day.
Arrangements are now being made for the formal signing of the surrender terms at the earliest possible moment. General Douglas MacArthur has been appointed the Supreme Allied Commander to receive the Japanese surrender.
World War II was finally over.
In New York City, as throughout a rejoicing nation and world, vast throngs of grateful, happy people celebrate the end of fighting, the dawn of peace.
When the news of the final surrender came over the wire to China, there were celebrations and more celebrations. I don't think I'll ever see a happier bunch of humanity than the guys around here, myself included.
And from Czechoslovakia, Army technician John S. Stice reported,
"The best news I've heard is that the war with Japan is over. I'm now looking forward to returning to the States soon and resuming work at FCA. There were shouts of joy amongst us when we received the news of VJ Day, but little celebrating. I guess most of us will wait until we return to the States to do our celebrating."
Then in early 1946, a letter by Sergeant First Class Andrew N. Morrison mentioned more good news.
"I received the news today that FCA is to be sent back to Washington, D.C., and I'm very glad to hear such wonderful news. I know a lot of us wants to renew old friendships there."
The Grapevine had been a true lifeline to FCA employees. Through this wartime newsletter, they learned that their colleagues had earned virtually every award given by the armed services. But the Grapevine had also borne tragic news. Some FCA soldiers had been killed. Others had become prisoners of war. So the war's end was indeed cause for joy, but also reflection.
I've traveled enough to make me glad the war is on this side and not at home. I've seen people's home go up in debris in a split second and leave the people without a home, and perhaps that poor family had saved for that home for a lifetime. Have seen ships torpedoed and sunk in a few minutes, taking nearly all of the crew down with them. This war is a terrible thing.
Elizabeth Welsh, the serviceman's editor for the Grapevine, recognized the suffering and devastation the war had caused, but she believed that soldiers' experience could lead to a world of greater tolerance and friendship.
Almost every letter reaching the desk of the serviceman's editor brings some comment on life and conditions in far-off lands. Never again for them can life narrow down to a single community or even a single country. Their concepts are forever broadened to encompass a world in which all men of whatever race or color must live in harmony with each other, all working together for the common good. It is unfortunate that it took a war to tear down the fences many of us had built around our little private worlds.